Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road, where our guest today is my friend Mary Collins. And if this isn't intimidating, Mary, you're one of the best communicators I've ever seen in my life.
No, come on.
I'm not kidding. We did those charity auctions together, and I would just listen to you, and you're amazing.
But I'll tell you, the people in the audience had to open their pocketbooks, and boy, did we raise some money.
We did.
It was a 1-2 punch.
We really did. I love the fact that you're a daughter of a car dealer. Collins Oles, right?
Yes, sir.
And did you grow up being at the dealership all the time? Like,
I sure did. Running around. I mean, the smell, just being in here is like being at home.
makes you think.
It does. Collins Oldsmobile was amazing. Started by my grandfather and his brother, who eventually went to Indianapolis to build an even larger dealership. But I love hearing the great stories about how they took care of their people and the folks that bought from Collins Oldsmobile. So some wonderful memories there. Hate that it's gone, but love going by Collins Drive, which is off of Coldwater Road, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the daughter of a car dealer.
My mom and dad bought Oldsmobiles, I think, all through the 70s and probably early 80s. So my first date was in an Oldsmobile from
Well, we could turn
Collins
the whole show into that.
Yeah, we really could. We really could. You grew up Catholic, right?
I sure did.
And then you go to Purdue, and something happens where you make your faith your own. How would you describe that?
I went to Purdue against my will. I was going to go to Indiana University, as all the cool kids did, which is very hard to come off my tongue now because I'm such a Purdue fan, but I have to be so transparent. Yeah, I wanted to be like all the cool kids and go to Indiana University, and I was told absolutely not, because I had a sister that went to Purdue and a sister that went to IU at the same time, and the two programs mirrored one another to look as if Purdue was going to be the right choice, and I wanted to be a nurse, so they put me in the nursing program, and I went kicking and fighting to Purdue to the nursing program, and they laid out my 4 years. And there I went. You know, I would do anything to make my mom happy and proud. So going to class one day, I was struggling with my grades and how to do the next right thing. And I thought I had some time to kill. There was the church. So I went, the door was open, and just kneeled and prayed and asked for God's guidance as to, you know, how was I to continue to get the scholarships that I needed, make the grades. And I just asked for peace of heart. I went off to class, and you had to take the core classes at that time, Com 114, which to me was, you know, talking in class. And somebody said to me in that class, you know, this is an occupation. And I said, you know, communications is an occupation. And that was something in these days that you didn't have those classes growing up in college. And this gal said, you know, I want you to come somewhere and meet some friends of mine. And she quickly became a mentor, and, you know, began to see, you know, that I had strengths. Bottom line was, I switched my major, which I had always thought I was going to be a nurse. I loved making people feel better. And I learned you could talk for a living. I don't think I've shut up since. I mean, it was, I never worried about grades again. I met a group of friends who affirmed me. And it was so surreal because I had come from church and I had asked for his guidance. It was his will, not mine. And I get to make people feel better, Mitch, because doing the news for me has never been about being on TV. It has always been about getting people the information that they need or sharing a cup of coffee, which to me is such an intimate experience because they are choosing you. Mm-hmm. And what a gift that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you graduate with a degree in communications.
I did.
And you're planning to be on national news as an anchor.
Well, aren't we all?
And what's your
Is
first?
this not national? Of course it is.
And what's your first job?
Well, I had to get 6 internships in college, and Purdue was good to me. I eventually was one of the vice presidents of the university, and had a lot of leadership roles. So I soared once I allowed God to take over my will, so to speak. Purdue just allowed me to take off. It affirmed me in every way. So through those internships, I did learn that, you know, in front of the camera is where I wanted to be. But through learning that, I did a lot of behind the scenes, which brought me a lot of respect for what your audio and your camera people are doing now. It all comes together because of a crew. And so I was actually interning and working at 21 on the weekends, coming home and working at Christmas time. I thought I was all that. You know, I had that job locked in after college. And about 2 weeks before I graduated, they were bought and sold to a new company. And many of the latest hires had to be let go. That was me. So I came back to Fort Wayne, and I was just really trying to get that first break. And I just couldn't find it. I didn't know why anybody wouldn't give me that first break. So my first job here was I worked at a morning radio show, which I felt, you know, was beneath me. I was to be on TV. And then right after the radio show was over, I would head to Channel 55, where I was Happy the Hobo's assistant as Marvy Mary, a 90-minute live TV show. So imagine, I went from Mary in the mornings to Marvy Mary, and I was really trying hard to be the news lady and losing credibility in my mind every single day. Sending out hundreds of resume tapes all across the country until I finally got the big break.
And where was that?
Greenville, Mississippi. So it loaded up the U-Haul and left my mom, who was my rock, and off we went, you know, traveling the country. And within a day of, you know, there, you not only reported the news, shot the news, wrote the news, and then at the end of the day, anchored the news. I called her and I'd recorded it, and I put the phone down and I made her listen to the entire newscast. And I said, Mom, if God took me tomorrow, I'd be the happiest person alive, because I did it. And the next day they said, where did you come from? And I thought, oh no, what have I done wrong? And they said, because you get it. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, you were down in the soil. I mean, you made us feel like we were there with the tobacco buttworm, like we smelt it, we felt it. And I said, was that wrong? And they said, no, we've just fired our news director, and now you're running the newsroom and you're our main anchor. And I was like, oh no, I just came here to, you know, hone my skills.
Wow.
And that's kind of how it went for me. I just wasn't supposed to get my first break in Fort Wayne. I was supposed to be affirmed. And yeah, God always knew the plan. It just took me a while to get it.
Where'd you go next?
Rockford, Illinois. Again, I was trying to get back home, and Rockford said they would do whatever it took to lure me that way. And
Are you pursuing other bigger networks or stations, or are they pursuing you?
at this point, they were pursuing me. Yes, I always kept the door open, and I wondered where that next one would be. In fact, you know, right then I was looking to come to Evansville as a way to get back closer to home. And they really, really bought out the Evansville opportunity and did everything they could. Pulled out all the stops to the point that I still look back and shake my head. And when I did finally make the move to come back to Fort Wayne, they threw a party like I've never seen, just in the thought of the gift of having me. And you know, it really, there's something to be said for being wanted. And I know about me today that I'm a success when I know that I'm wanted in a situation and affirmed there. If I don't know where I stand, I tend to run circles around myself.
I guess Peter Jennings wanted to meet you because of the Rockford, Illinois success.
Yes, that is true. We switched affiliations. I went there, we were an NBC affiliate, and they were struggling in the ratings. So we had a good news staff. You know, I hired some great people to work with me and around me. And, you know, I think good managers come because they maybe don't want to be good managers. They're just people that are right there in the core of their folks. I love news. News is not about what comes down on a feed. It's about what impacts Mitch's day. Do you have to know it? How does it impact your life? And if it doesn't, it really probably shouldn't be in the newscast. And so that's really how we would tell stories. You know, you need to hear this because, and that's how I taught, you know, my reporters to be on the air, is they had to take me somewhere, show me something. And so we quickly became number one as the ABC or the NBC affiliate when they announced we were switching affiliations to ABC. And we had Grey's Anatomy we had all the big NBC shows, so this was going to be the impossible obstacle. But somehow we were able to battle and come back to number one. And that's when Peter Jennings was anchoring the ABC News, of which we were coming in and out of. And he said, I don't know how Rockford, Illinois did this, but I've got to meet that girl. So, yeah, that was... Yeah, I've had some good, blessings in my life, that's for sure. And none of it came from me. It's all because I trusted and heard his word to me.
You interviewed candidate George W. Bush?
That is true. He came to Greenville, Greenville, Illinois, Greenville, Mississippi, when he was running for president at that time. I'm showing my age, but he was doing the stops to travel different areas, and so that was a big deal. We brought in live trucks, and that was just such a small market, and all the big markets were there. And so at that point, he was granting very few interviews. So that to me is personal, because he had to be very open about his battle with what was, an alcohol situation that took to the limelight. And he's been honest. He's authored about it. His wife, Laura, has been very open about it. The media has been critical, but yet this is a real problem that's touched a lot of people, and he has overcome it. And that to me meant a lot. It means even more now, I think, than ever before.
Well, I want to talk about that, but I want to make sure I understand, at what point do you get married and start a family?
Right. So I wanted to come back to Fort Wayne to do all of that. I just was homesick for my mom. She and I have always had a bond that is just, so very dear. So because I was working so much, I didn't know how to not work so much. That's a big part of me, how to shut that off. So it was time, after being gone for a number of years, to say, what, it's time to focus on, I think it's, to start a family. So after being in Rockford, I was in Greenville for a couple of years, Rockford for a couple of years, to say, I'm going to come home. So I was married when I moved to Greenville, Mississippi. And by the time I was in Rockford, I'd been there a couple of years and thought, I want to come home. So we followed my husband's career back here. And so I became employed in the media here. And within 3 years, then I had my first son, Cameron. And then,
First of three.
First of three, that's correct.
3 boys.
And so many people were able to, see me have my boys, which is such a blessing. So,
well, where does alcohol come in your story?
Right. Alcohol was never a big attraction to me. There was alcoholism in my family. So growing up in an alcoholic family, I think with kids that have that, and I think everybody, whether you have it in your family or you don't, an alcoholic. You know how it's affected a family, a working situation, a loved one, a friendship. You know what it can do. Seeing what it has done to a family like it did mine, I was always going to be very vigilant to make sure that it didn't impact my family or me. So it was never a big attraction to me. I would see people in college or high school that had issues, and I threw myself into other things, kids, work. But what I didn't realize was, and I think the best way to put it, Mitch, is genetics may have loaded the, so to speak, gun for me, but I think it was the circumstances that pulled the trigger for alcohol.
What do you mean by that?
So whether somebody wants or doesn't want to become something or have a disease isn't necessarily in their control. But what was in my control that I wasn't aware of was my thinking, was the circumstances that I allowed to happen. And that is, I tend to be somebody who I can take care of that, I can do that. Because growing up in a home or in a situation where there was alcohol, I took on the role of, I could make everybody feel better. I can make that better. I was much of a pleaser. I'm still much of a pleaser. I could be, running late, and if you needed something, I can tell you right now, I'd want to do it for you way before I'd do it for me. When I look back, I see how I put myself in situations where I was overdoing in college, overdoing when I was out of town in Mississippi and in Rockford. But my mom could see through me and maybe catch me before I would fall. She had an amazing way to catch those, or even a phone call, "Hi dear, it's Mom." And just that one tone, that one person that was almost your God spy on earth. and I lost her unexpectedly. She had an aortic aneurysm. And, life goes on. But for me, it was losing so much more than a mom. It was losing a best friend. And I was working an overnight shift, and my kids were getting older. And an overnight shift, I loved my job. I had the best job in the world. And that was the time when I was most myself. And my kids, I would do anything for. To this day, they know me better than anybody. But I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how not to let anybody down. And when I would enter a room, it was always, there's Mary, she can do anything. And it would just feed that, I can't let anybody down. I just can't. But I could let myself down pretty darn easy. So when it came to 10 o'clock and one of my kids would still have a project that was due, I would think, I better help. Or when it came to, not saying no to a fundraising event, I just didn't know how to say no. I was looking to fill what wasn't there. I mean, the way we're all born with this empty hole. And, maybe some of us fill it with food and some of us fill it with shopping. And I could fill that hole with working a lot or with, positive feedback. When I lost my mom, I was filling it with a lot of, you're doing great, but I didn't know how to take care of myself. So when it came to sleeping, I wouldn't, it'd be time to go to sleep and I'd look at my watch and I think, oh gosh, if I go to sleep now, I'll get 4 hours. And so I'd hear somebody say, well, I have wine. And so it started with just a glass of wine at night. What's a glass of wine? And well, that worked tremendously. The want becomes a need. And at some point, the line gets crossed. And then you're driving to work. And I'm making a deal with God. And I'm saying, all right, God, tonight, no wine. No wine for me. I'm not myself. I'm not 100%. Because I wasn't going to shut off that overdoing. I wasn't going to shut off staying at work until 3 to pick up my kids because I wasn't going to put a drop of alcohol in my mouth before I picked up my kids. And I was going to have all their food ready to get them to swim, to get them to their homework, to get them to what they needed to do, to continue to work. But when it came to trying to get to sleep, I better get to sleep. Yeah, can't let anybody down. But I didn't see where that line was getting crossed. And I didn't know how to take care of myself. And there wasn't that person to call me out on it. I had to hit rock bottom in order for there to be a change produced. And that pain had to be so great that the result had to be better. So I get this chance at a second life, and it's almost as if every day is brighter than I've ever known. I'm 10 times the mom I ever was. The days are 100 times brighter than I could have ever imagined. I'm better to myself, which makes me so much better. I don't take anything for granted.
Can you take me what's going on inside, maybe around your first OWI, and you come on the news and you make a public apology with Ryan Elijah. Kind of what's going on inside of you then?
I hadn't worked that day. I had called in sick. That was kind of my MO. When I was overdone, I would call in sick. And I'll get people that'll run into me and say, I knew you were in trouble. So I was wanting somebody to call me out, but I didn't know how to do that. So on that day, I'd called in sick. I'm not feeling well. And the phone rings, and it's my hairdresser. And she says, Mary, where are you? You've got an appointment. It's 9 a.m. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. Again, I jump into I've let you down. I'm so sorry. I throw on a baseball cap. I'm out the door. I didn't think a thing of it. There I was, off to the races, out the door. I round the corner, get a flat tire. My husband says, oh, that's okay. I'll switch cars with you. He gives me a second car. I go and I'm off. And 2 miles later, I'm stopped.
And you're over the legal limit. And I think you did an incredibly courageous thing to come on the air and admit that. but that isn't rock bottom for you.
No.
You end up having a couple more OWIs. What actually brings you to the bottom?
Well, because Mitch, the thinking is still wrong. And I think that is what, there's just such a misconception. Why didn't you just stop? Just stop. Oh my goodness, wouldn't that be easy? If I get to the point where there's alcohol that's tempting me, I'm already in a relapse. There is no beverage that tempts me today because my thinking is 100% correct. My thinking problem, still way out of line. I was still very entitled. Well, that was a mistake. I was set up, you know? I mean, they were just looking out for me. I mean, they wouldn't really do that, right? It's above, and that is everybody. Everybody. So that first time, I was very sorry. That was. The second time, it was, well, maybe you got set up. And I started to believe that. Maybe I did. You are responsible for changing your thinking. There has to be a dramatic change, and it has to come from a faith base where you allow God to take control of this. If you do it on our will, it'll never work.
Always fall short.
Absolutely, it'll never work. I don't care what it is that you're bearing as a burden. Parents of children know this, and they pray about it every day, and we want to change it. We can't.
How did surrender happen for you?
Somebody said, parents fall, but parents that get up in front of their kids have the opportunity to show them that you can rise. And so I kept trying to hold on to that. But I kept living in the past of my regret and how much I had let people down. And I was never going to move forward if I kept doing that. And that's what kept me very, very sick. So I had brought on board about every counselor, motivational person that you can imagine that was Christian and faith-based for my children and for myself. Now, mind you, a lot had happened, and it should have, from the court system that we had faced, and rightfully so. But this individual, he was young, a young kid that he came in and he was there really to counsel with myself and my kids. And my son was upstairs and, his approach was, let the kids be where they're going to be. And I knew that I'd love him when he came in and he sat down Indian style on my couch and he had 2 different socks on. And I thought, this is my kind of guy. So I was all ears and I was taking notes. And, he was asking me about my boys. And he looked at me and I just said, what mom does this? And he's like, listen to me. You have got to forgive yourself. God has forgiven you. Do you know this, right? He has forgiven you. I mean, he looked right through me like he'd known me my entire life. Like literally, God was sitting there. And he said, until you accept his forgiveness, you cannot move to the next chapter, which must be so miraculous because this is what he has for you. And imagine what's ahead. But until you accept his forgiveness, we can't get to that next place. And it was, I thought, who am I to hold on to this? I mean, it gave me this sense of, again, like I was doing the wrong thing. And he said, so let it go. You have today, you don't have tomorrow. You have right now. And from that point on, weights were, shackles, weights, and it was a new beginning for me from that day forward.
And Brenda Gerber came into your life, and
there are people, and you know that they've had big crosses when they don't leave your side. Anybody knows things are great when there's a Collins Oldsmobile and new cars in your driveway, but when jail cells are closing and sirens are on and your kids are being taken away from you and people stand by you and walk into a room like you're the best thing that ever happened, those are great friends that have amazing faith. And God works through them. And that is the person that I want to be. That's why I'm here today, because those people have allowed for me to be the person that I am. I would not be here. I don't know where I'd be without those people.
Mary, you have a successful media business. God's using you to help other people in similar situations, and I just can't thank you enough for your vulnerability today. I know God will use that to draw others to himself. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wherever you are today, maybe it's your thinking that's getting in the way of some really tough choices. And maybe it's time to surrender your thoughts to God. Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 10:5, take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So for the next week, why don't you try that? Every thought that comes to your mind, say, Jesus, is this the thought you want me to have? I want to give it to you. Restore my thinking. Renew my mind, like Paul wrote about in Romans 12:2. Make my mind new again. I want to honor you with my mind. And soon you will see that your choices will be wiser. And God will use you to bring his restoration to others. I just want to say this as well. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 10:13 that every temptation, it's all common to all of us. We're all going to get it. But God always offers a doorway out. And so look for that light in every situation, that light to freedom, that light to his love, as you do take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ.
Make sure that your friends and your family, even somebody that you're praying for right now, has a copy. You can send it in the mail. You can write a little note. Keep one handy for that person that you just might pass on the street and you're just thinking they need a little something special.